Does it look like a lot of clutter behind me?
No, it looks fab. As
Like
always, Doug, you're looking great and we're
no.
delighted to have you on. So welcome again. Yeah, we were talking just before we came on here about this P Diddy trial and you wanted to close the door so your daughter can't hear you. The details of this are going to be graphic, but you know, this is one of the biggest celebrity trials really in a long time. So, it's details that are being heard in open court. So we're going to discuss it as much as we can. I want to say first off, I don't know anybody at all who does this kind of stuff or lives this kind of lifestyle. You don't
It's
either,
true.
yeah?
I don't, but as I was thinking, because I have to tell you about the statute he might be violating called the Mann Act, MANN. I was looking things up and realizing, there's a history of this in entertainment. Chuck Berry, was with a very young girl, great, the rock and roll legend, abusing women. Led Zeppelin, Jimmy Page had a relationship with a 14-year-old.
Yes.
For a couple of years. And you know what? Everybody knew, but you didn't. These were rock gods, tearing stuff up, on their tour and living debauched lives. So, yeah, I think the only parallel are these kind of excessive rock and roll life of the 70s. But I don't know. I don't know anybody who has that kind of money and power, because that's what it's really about.
Exactly. And how you could, finding yourself in the situation with those kind of parties. And, there's one person that is being accused of enjoying all this and being happy with all this, and that's P Diddy, the famous. So what we're going to do today is we're going to go over what has so far been said in court. To be concise, I suppose there's been 3 major female witnesses so far, and we'll talk about what they've had to say. P Diddy's behaviour in the courtroom has been corrected and questioned a few times by the judge, who seems to be getting slightly annoyed with him. And also, I think maybe we'll start off with how he got to the dock of the courtroom. And we did talk about this before, but for those who don't want to have to go back and listen to another podcast, let's just recap that.
Sure. How did he get this? But the feds raided his houses in 2024. Don't quote me on the month, but
I think it was March.
March, yeah, exactly. And that's what's amazing that has come out since Cassie and since you and I spoke is that his most recent girlfriend, he continued to do this after the raids. He was doing it in the summer of. So this excessive hubris and sense of getting away with. Maybe not murder, but they raided his house. They found, the headline was all the baby oil, right? Like, who needs thousands of bottles of baby oil? Well, he does. They found guns. They found, every drug you can imagine. And they alleged at that point that they had a massive racketeering, conspiracy, criminal organization. Honestly, in the court itself, we could deal with the details of whether or not it's actually risen to that standard, but this was a massive, hundreds of federal agents in the U.S. They don't spend that kind of money. I'm sure it's the same in Ireland. If hundreds and hundreds of people are deployed, they think they have a good case, right?
For sure.
So how are the mighty fallen? It's sort of he just went from living this life to he's in a 24-hour confinement in one of the worst jails, and he doesn't have access to his hair dye, so his hair has gone to his natural white. He's wearing these dad sweaters, cardigans, and
so I haven't. You see, he's in custody, is he? He's not got bail since when? Since March of 24.
Oh yeah, they went. I think it was up to. Let me ask people to Google it. It was a huge amount, $50 million or something.
Yeah.
And because remember, maybe I should repeat this. When they caught him, he was on the verge of fleeing. He has a private jet, passports, cash. So even giving up his passport and an ankle bracelet, those kinds of things, they still wouldn't give him the bail. And I guess they figured this guy can get fake passports, just like organized crime, right? So he's been in a miserable situation
since then. And of course, he's on the verge of fleeing because he knows something is coming. Because in November 2023, his ex-partner, Cassandra Ventura, who we probably will refer to as Cassie, she filed a lawsuit alleging this sexual abuse, trafficking and violence over the course of their 10-year relationship. It settled
Yeah.
But
And that,
within days, 2 more lawsuits had come. So he knew something was coming from him for a few months and was
well, that,
obviously preparing to go.
that opened the floodgates, so to speak,
Yes.
right? Once you settle that, then things, even if you've paid people in non-disclosures, then these, it opened this all up as a potential criminal case, not just a civil lawsuits. But yeah, then of course there was this infamous apology, because then the tapes, after the feds raided him, they had access to this, California hotel, Hollywood hotel, and he had been accused of beating her into it, but now we saw it, and I'm sure it's a very disturbing video. He's grabbing her by the hair, he's kicking the shit out of her, and he's a big guy, and she's a frail little girl.
Yeah, this is footage from a hotel hallway from 2016. It's published by CNN, and it shows him basically beating the shit out of this lady, Cassie, and it sort of mirrors exactly what she was alleging in her civil suit.
And he denied it. And then, this very, very, I think I told you last time we spoke, a famous actor said to me, he can never make it as an actor because he's got nothing in his eyes. There's no soul, there's no emotion. And he, was the most ham-fisted acting. He went on Instagram or whatever it was and said, I've gone to God, I've looked at, and he apologized and or whatever. I've made my peace with the Lord. He clearly is just a bullshit artist, and that's one of the things came up, is that he paid the security, I think it was $100,000 to give him that tape. Well, I guess they seized it from his house, right? So he was in control of a lot of things and able to pay off a lot of people for years. So I've heard these allegations. I didn't know about these. I had to be in this inner circle. I mean, you put a story out that said author partied with Diddy. That was it, but didn't go to a Diddy party. You used to see him at nightclubs. I was around him, but I didn't know about this world. This, and you hear these now. These, it's whispered, or now it's whispered out loud about Usher and Justin Bieber, these young people being groomed in his world. That hasn't come out at trial. But we can get into the violence and against other people and his jealousy, and but it started, it brought down his empire.
And he's still fighting for that, of course, because he's fighting this case. Let's get ourselves into the courtroom. So after that release of that video in May, in September, he's arrested in the Park Hyatt Hotel in Manhattan, and then he's brought before the courts. He looks for bail, as you say, he doesn't get it. He's in custody. Further civil lawsuits are filed against him in the meantime, and by April, he is indicted. This trial is happening. And May of this year, there's a jury selected. And what follows is the first major witness, who is the by now heavily pregnant Cassie. So she has broken up with him and she's gone off and is in another relationship. There was some sort of a story about they wanted her, or did P Diddy want her giving her evidence behind a screen because he thought that people would be sympathetic towards her?
Yeah, they've tried a lot of motions.
Yeah.
I thought she was a very, compelling witness. I didn't, there's no cameras allowed but you see the courtroom artist sketches. She was 8.5 months pregnant. And once she got off the stand, after maybe 2 weeks of testimony, she gave birth. And she seems to have a really, lovely man in her life now, father. And it's the dynamic of these people facing each other in court, because, he's got to look at this man, Diddy, has literally beat the shit. And also we can get into what he made her do. She was a very compelling witness. And of course they brought out many, many texts and sort of counter-proof that she enjoyed it and that she was willing. And that gets into this whole thing about women in abusive relationships and what they do to stay, and also her career goals. Because
what did she have to say, Doug? She had been she met him, she was kind of an upcoming artist herself, wasn't she? And quickly she was quickly brought into his world as sort of something on his arm. Yeah.
So we can get at the end there to his current girlfriend, which is about a 2-year relationship. She's testifying against him, and she's on the stand at this moment. But Cassie was in an 11-year relationship. So she was a 19-year-old girl, beautiful young girl, and he's a star maker. He picks her out of nowhere and he's like recording, and then he's dangling this over her constantly. Well, I'll hold your album back. Now he used violence. He used all kinds of coercion, and essentially what he forced her to do, in addition to beating her regularly, etc., was performative sexual acts where male. Should I get into this, or I don't know?
Get into it, because I think anybody listening is going to know this is graphic stuff. So if you're, anybody who has reason to turn this off, because we're not really going to. We have to tell this story to discuss what evidence has been heard before the court. So
it's salacious, but I'll say it in a clinical way, I guess we could say. So he would, he would ask, Cassie would be the one that had to do it and contact porn stars, and some of them have testified in the trial, to arrive and perform with her while he watched. And, this gets into that kind of Led Zeppelin analogy. They would do it in hotel rooms, and they would do $100,000 of damage. Like he would have her performing in a blow up little kiddies pool filled with baby oil. And he kept saying more baby oil, more glistening, while these men serviced her. And it's almost unbelievable to think of 36 straight hours. There must have been breaks, but it would be 3 days but there's cocaine, ketamine, all these drugs. I didn't even know something called pink cocaine, which is a form. So she was drugged up. She was saying constantly, "Oh, I love it. I can't wait to do another." They're called freak-offs. And he would sit there pleasuring himself.
And this would go on for days, and it could happen up in his own homes as well. Was she living with him at this time? Because the relationship doesn't start like this. He does bring her out for dinner and do nice things first, and sort of brings her into his world. It takes a while before he starts suggesting she does these sort of things. Yeah,
and I almost think it's like what they say about pornography in general. There's a kind of numbness factor after a minute. So it escalates, right? And clearly his sexual deviance or whatever was, or that's not nice to say deviance. His sexual predilection was for voyeurism, watching. He really enjoyed getting other men to pleasure his wife. And I think at times she was exhausted. And I mean, as a woman, this, she was getting UTIs. You can't have that. You can't have that kind of penetrative sex for days and days and days without it. And he would say it doesn't matter, and he would make her have sex on her period. And I mean,
now when we say maker, it's sort of got this. He is the powerful one in this relationship. It starts with him being her employer, really, as well as her lover. And she slowly finds that her career slips away, and she ends up just becoming this sort of almost like a sex object for him. And it feels from her evidence, which must have been really difficult for her to give. In particular, as you say, she's in a new relationship now, totally different part of her life, and she's about to have a child. I mean, this story is all over the world, and forevermore, when you Google her, the details of this will be there. But she does describe, I think, she describes almost like Diddy is there in the background. Yes, he's voyeuristic, but he's almost choreographing something. He's directing this show in front of him.
That is exactly what he wanted. You said it right. He was the ringmaster, and this is what I want you to do, and fillet him, and he'll do this and this. And the aftermath, they would, like I said, $100,000. There'd be baby oil all over the walls, occasion, fluids, sometimes blood. And no, it was from her menstruation. Nobody was beat up. And she just got. And the weirdest thing is his adult kids, are sitting in the courtroom watching their father. I mean, whatever you think of people's private sex lives, he's a public figure, and there's no coming back from this. Let's say he's acquitted. There is no coming back from this level of humiliation. I mean, just imagine somebody. Well, they always say in America, there's rehabilitation for almost everybody. I don't think it's as true. I don't think it's as true in Europe, but people come back from these scandals, masturbating on, what's the guy? Jeffrey Toobin of CNN, masturbating, caught on a Zoom call. Now he's back, he did his penance, writing for the New Yorker or whatever it was. But I don't see him coming back from this level of public shaming, because I don't know how his kids sit there and this, his mother. Now, just to be clear, Cassie was coercion. Doesn't even spell it out. Yeah, he held the strings of her career, but he beat her really badly, like hospitalized.
Now, has he accepted that part of the evidence? Has he accepted he took part in all these and that he beat her?
Well, I don't think there's any deny. I think the only argument his defense can make is that what people do behind closed doors, and that they have text messages of her saying, "Oh, I can't wait. Too bad we couldn't do it again before." Oh, well, you liked it, And I assume at times, I don't know. I don't know enough about the porn. I'm sure there's times where it's just work for the girl, but there might be times it's pleasurable. That doesn't mean it's I was Googling this a bit to think about. I don't think the defense the prosecution did a very good job presenting the psychology of a woman. So my mom's a retired educational psychologist. So she mentioned to me learned helplessness. And I would actually ask anybody, if you really want to know about this, it's not new age self-help stuff. This is 1967. American psychologist did experiments with dogs, and if they got negative stimulus, like enough painful stuff, even given the opportunity to escape, they wouldn't, because they'd learned dependence and helplessness. And you have to understand that, because you see the comments on YouTube and after the trial, "Oh, come on, you had a chance to leave. You had plenty of chances to leave." That doesn't really get into the mind of she had her own apartment. It was $10,000 US a month, but he paid it. So he would constantly hold out, your life and your lifestyle. But there's also the sense of, these groupies. The 14-year-old girl that Jimmy Page slept with was you can't consent in California until you're 18. But she did say, "Of course, I didn't do it against my will," and blah, blah. So, and she, Cassie's 19 to a 35-year-old. He was molding her. This came out, the word grooming. He picked her, saying she's young. What did she say? He said to somebody, this came out in evidence, his personal trainer and personal assistants have testified. He said something like, she's moldable. She's, who knows? She might have been sexually inexperienced, and he just molded her into what he wanted. And I think that's get away from the sex for a minute. This is about power and control, egomania. It must be something so strong in him that need to. I run this, I run you. And
another cross-examination, that's a lot of it, those texts like you describe, where, she doesn't sound as if she's, all this stuff is there that shows she's not complaining and not trying to walk away. And that's what he's using in his defense. But it seems to me that his bigger problem in all this is the sex trafficking, which is that he used people. Basically, you're describing that scene in a hotel room with 100 bottles of baby oil and a blow-up paddling pool, whatever it is, and all these people that are brought in. So P Diddy does nothing for himself, I imagine, with that power and that level of wealth. There's all these other people that do things for him, that bring these things in. And this is what I suppose the prosecution is trying to prove, that among the many things that he brought in from one state to the other were human beings for these sex sessions.
Yeah. He was clever enough. He would have, that's another piece of evidence. He would have her do it. She had to find the guy. She had to pay the cash. They had all these pseudonyms and aliases, etc. I can get into the technicality. I had to look this up. It's the one thing, because a lot of people feel, and I may be one of them, that what they're showing, he's a horrible human being. He's a violent man to women. He's a wanted men to ejaculate on his wife, and then she, or his girlfriend, had to come in with and rub it on his nipples.
Right.
Which people just said, now his current girlfriend said, yes, he's definitely bi-curious. He's just afraid to be with men. So there's all these levels of things. But I think The charge that you say, it's called the Mann Act, MANN. It goes back to 1910, and it was really pretty racist law. It was used for years. Like they got Jack Johnson, the first black heavyweight champion. He traveled with a former white prostitute who he married across state lines, and he was charged and went to prison. That's what they got Chuck Berry with a white girl. Mann Act is basically transporting someone for sexual or they kind of broaden the definition to a number of things. But by bringing a sex worker and paying them across state lines, it's a federal offense. It seems like a loophole almost. It seems like a fine. You did a lot worse things than that, right? He didn't just beat her. He beat his assistant. He dangled people out of windows. Here's another one that I think rises to some level of stuff, but I don't know why they didn't charge him at the time. She started dating Kid Cudi, a rapper.
This is
right? Cassie, sorry.
Yeah.
Cassie was dating Kid Cudi, and he got so jealous, et cetera, that he threw a Molotov cocktail at Kid Cudi's car. That was unintentionally alliterative. He threw a Molotov cocktail and burned up this man's vehicle. They never proved it was him, but they later saw each other in a nightclub, and the Kid Cudi testified and said, yeah, he kind of said, well, we're all good now, meaning, I did it, whatever. So, these things are not just routine, people get jealous, but, he went and he basically said, I'm going to kill this guy.
Right.
And he had guns. So the fact that he didn't kill anybody in this story yet or whatever is almost a miracle because he got very close.
Yes.
So, but this is all part of I guess they're trying to say in court, and I'm not a lawyer.
So now what happened with Kid Cudi, the rapper? And is he still with us?
Yeah.
He's still alive. So
he's fine.
Did she stick with him, or it was just a brief kind of a relationship? What happened, Cassie? How did she get out of the relationship with him?
I think he scared her out of it.
Yeah,
but
after that beating in 2016.
Yeah, beating, and then the guy's car blows up. He knows who did it. It seems like what his current girlfriend is saying now is that he made it clear he was not monogamous. So I think their relationship was 11 years long, but there were times she managed to leave and try to move on with her life. I'm sure she was trying to leave him and go to this. And then, I found out where you are. I mean, I can get you anyway. He would say this kind of stuff. I can get you in. You think you can escape me? Like he just was he made himself sound like God,
So she eventually does escape, and she issues these civil proceedings against him, which essentially are what collapses his whole world. But so she's given evidence. She steps down from the witness box, and she ends up giving birth just during the trial as well, which is, I suppose, one nice little bit of the whole thing. The next kind of major witness, apart from, I suppose, all those people, those former escorts and everything that have kind of backed up her story. The next major witness is a woman known as Maya. She's a former employee, and she also takes the stand and says she was also the victim of sexual assault.
Oh yeah, sorry. She's going by Jane.
Okay.
She's an influencer, whatever that means today. Her real name is Maya.
So she's the current. She's the current witness. So who's in between those two?
Witnesses. There was his assistant who alleged a couple of assistants, a male assistant, a female assistant who said he raped her.
Yes, I think that's the witness I was referring to as Maya. So that was a different witness.
Oh,
certainly different name. So what does she have to say?
The assistant?
Yes.
Oh, that he beat her. That she would work 80-hour weeks at very little pay. I kept wondering, why would you want this job?
And and does she believe she's having a relationship with him at the beginning, or is the sexual assault an actual just out of the blue?
Yeah, I don't
moment
think
of violence.
I think they had no relationship, but at some point she said he assaulted her or raped her. The evidence she was mostly giving us what she witnessed him do to Cassie.
Okay.
So her evidence was basically, I saw her, threatened to kill her. He punched, and also one of her best friends. No, the assistant might have been. There were 2 or 3 assistants. I'm sorry to.
Okay, yeah, no problem.
But they one of them also said, he came in and just choked me and said, where the you know where the fuck she is? Tell me where she is. And if Cassie hid anywhere, or the current girlfriend who's testifying, he kicked doors down. Like, he couldn't be stopped. He was this force of terror in their lives. So the assistant basically corroborated everything Cassie said without a doubt. They all also said, though, that they've been paid. Everybody has accepted money. And that's another thing. So they, then the defense gets up there and says, well, have you been paid by, or do you have an agreement with the prosecution to not be charged, et cetera, et cetera? They've managed to kind of, in every single case, say, you've got some vested interest in this other than just justice, right? But, it doesn't, to me, it doesn't mitigate.
They've all sort of done deals themselves with the prosecution, in other words, because they may have committed crimes themselves by not reporting this, or by, by various other things. Perhaps they make phone calls they order escorts, etc. They witness violence and don't report it. They have been given a deal by the prosecution. If you give evidence, we won't go after you criminally. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it's a kind of immunity that you can say, I think they don't always reveal it, but it's called in the States unindicted co-conspirator.
Yes.
So some of them might have been charged, like the assistant might have been charged in facilitating the et cetera, the Mann Act. But no, we won't charge you if you give the evidence. So there's all kinds of things. The prosecution has a lot of, a lot of power in what they can put on the stand. But his defense, I will say, people are trying to read the tea leaves constantly. His defense has asked for a mistrial, I think at least once. Doesn't strike me that you want a mistrial if you think you're going to win, right? So I don't know that anybody, and also, as you said, let's get into that. The judge admonished him for nodding, like you're not supposed to make contact with the jurors, right? So it's an open court. The jurors know who he is, and he's kind of saying, yeah, see, she's contradicting herself. And the judge said, if you do that again, you're going to be out of the courtroom. You won't even be allowed to be in here.
So is he nodding towards the jury? I misunderstood this. Is he nodding when he agrees with evidence that's been given?
I assume that's, I don't, but if somebody said, oh, you willingly participate, don't you have doesn't this contradict your given testimony? And he's going,
I get you. Yeah.
And actually who knows what's going on. Now the prosecution wants to kick off one of the jurors who's a African-American guy who they said did not give full disclosure. So maybe they're thinking he has some, all you need in an American system, I assume it's the same. You need one person to say not guilty out of the 12, right? So,
well, you need that, or you need to find some sort of a technicality which can collapse the case, or you need to fight it and win, because there will be two sides here. And I suppose in the end of the day, for the jury, it'll be down to the charges he's actually facing, which are for sexual abuse, human trafficking, and other charges along those lines. What about Jane? Because there's been a lot of interest in this witness, largely because, are they still in a relationship now? She's his girlfriend.
She's his girlfriend. She testified about the terrorizing, the beatings, she's an influencer. I don't know what that means. He was paying her bills, but now he stopped, and now she's making her money on OnlyFans. So, who knows? But in any event, it came out of trial. Well, who's paying for it? You're a lawyer in your cases. Well, Sean is. Do you love him still? I love him. Of course, I love him. But she also testified horrific beatings. Now, they had text messages from her that showed something that they didn't have from Cassie, because who knows what's documented, of her saying, please, let's stop. I can't do this anymore. I'm not a prostitute, and I'm not. Both of them have said, well, why would you continue doing this? Because I was trying to please him. I knew what he liked. And so, of course, he would get angry if I didn't say I'm enjoying this. And it gets so twisted up in your mind, like who to believe and who not to believe. But I can certainly see somebody, if you're in an abusive relationship, you know that somebody's dominant and wants to be voyeuristic. You're going to say, well, did you like it, Daddy? Did you like it? Did you like it, Sean? Did you like it, Master? Whatever. You might have that in writing. But here's what I think is crazy. They raided, you got the dates correct, right? March 2024, they raided. Well, she's testifying that the most recent freak-off was like a few months after that, in July.
Right.
And
so he goes into custody in September of 2024. So they obviously haven't had relations since then, unless U.S. prisons
No,
allow. Yeah.
No conjugal. But after the raids, I mean, you or I, if 100 some agents swarm down on you, aren't you going to be on your best behavior? You know, he continued to have these freak offs with her, sex workers, etc. Well, after, and you're thinking, the sense of power, not just, you know, I'm an author, you're an author, the sense of power, entitlement, control, to know that you're facing life in prison. I'm not going to stop.
But I suppose in the way he's defending this case, he firstly is pleading not guilty to sexual assault. He's fighting it that it was consensual, isn't he? He's saying that they didn't object to it, that nobody was doing anything they weren't being asked to do or being paid to do. So he doesn't see it as a crime. So he doesn't stop after March, after the raids. He continues.
He surely knew that the feds considered it. Thing is, he knew he was being charged with these things, and I think his compulsions, or his you read about Jack the Ripper or these various people. Even when they know the heat is on, they can't stop. It's a compulsive.
Thing. Yeah,
I think so. I think the directorial thing you mentioned, the larger than life. I am in control of this. I think. This is the other thing. He would love to go on the stand, I think. People could ask him, will he testify in his own defense? He would love to, I think. But he has been a witness in others. A lawyer said, who was with him on his team, he is the worst. He would never stand up on cross-examination. He would be the worst witness. He's awful. I guess they do trial runs and stuff, right? I mean, whatever it's called, practice. They said he's so unbelievable, and I guess he gets so petulant, and the things you can't do when you're before a judge. I've been before a judge on something minor, and your lawyer says, you've been accused of something, keep your hands behind your back and always just say the words, Your Honor. That's it. I'm doing your arguing lawyer. He probably can't do that. He'll be arguing and yelling. I'm sure he's just arrogant, and he's facing a jury, and so it's and a jury may not, while they're asked to just consider the law and the charges, it can be sometimes difficult to get past the personality they see and maybe an arrogance in them. But I think what's interesting about Jane's testimony, his current girlfriend, as we'll call her, while that seems absolutely just beyond our logic that she's still in a relationship with him, she is all the same giving evidence that she was coerced into these drug-fueled hour-long sex sessions with male escorts. So she is backing up really Cassie's story in the first place. 100%. Everything she has said is almost, you're getting confused. And it's almost redundant, because you're like, well, this is, wait, did that happen to her or her? Oh, it happened to both of them. Exact same pattern, 2 decades later. What she said, as I've said, is, I need out. I can't do this anymore. And I think she said that yet last year. Like, I feel humiliated. I'm not, like, she said everything that a woman you think would be thinking. I know this pleases you, but I can't do this anymore. You're degrading me. I'm not a porn star. I am not this. I just love you. Can't I just be with you? And I think she testified something that makes a lot of sense. I only slept with these guys, these because I wanted to, at the end, I would sleep with him. That's all I really wanted, but this guy can only get off after he's watched all this other. So, it's kind of heartbreaking, but the other factor is in the power dynamic I mentioned. They all have something. They all want to be something, and he can make them that something, right? It's like the casting couch writ large, right? He could make Cassie's career. He held that. She never had a career, by the way. Another witness was in the Danity Kane, this other group. They've all basically said that's the thing he has. We want to be stars, and I think gold digger is not the right word, right? When you're so desperate to be a star, and this guy has so much power. He also had the power, and I guess he did this, to blackball people, to basically say, you won't have a career. You want to, I guess he did it to a few artists, right? He just shelved their careers and make a few phone calls. All the executives know each other. You probably never get an album out, right? So I guess if you're all you dreamed your whole life to be a Wizard of Oz, like, I want to be this, the star. Well, you might make it. you pull the carpet up.
If you do what I say. But I mean, so many echoes there. And I will say before I continue that P Diddy has pleaded not guilty. He is claiming his innocence in all these allegations, which they are still allegations until a jury go and consider what they're going to find him. But the echoes there of Harvey Weinstein, of the power he had over the actresses, over giving them roles in films. It's similar, and it is that sort of desire for fame and stardom. And, also there's talent behind that as well, isn't there? Actors and actresses and singers and rappers and all this, they have huge talents, and they have to go through these. I suppose we see them and get to know them when they've made it, they're famous and they're rich, and we're sort of, wow, look at that life they have. But to get there, they have to go through these people. There is no other way. And a lot of them, their drive can be to have their talent, on stage. Fame is sort of nearly a negative word, isn't it? Chasing fame sounds like something negative, but some of these people are hugely, hugely skilled and talented and proper additions to music and culture and the arts.
And if you think about the select few, I think it's true in almost every elite, to be a footballer of the level of Lionel Messi, it's not just luck. You have been, one fraction of 1% even make it to the first division to be at that level. She's not singing in a hotel bar. I'm sure Ireland is filled with people like that too. You see people that had once had a big hit, and you see them at some, you're doing coffee shops again. So to maintain that level of celebrity. And I think, so if you think about the fame, the intoxication of fame, we also are amazingly forgiving. I looked this up too, preparing for you. Who are the famous stars? John Lennon admitted, I used to beat my wife. I was a horrible, I used to be cruel to my woman. I beat her. But we don't think of that. We think of, imagine John, imagine peace and love, but pretty awful domestic violence. But when we think of our Pete Townsend, and he had his child pornography on his, I was just doing research for a novel. I love The Who. I love Pete Townsend. But you forgive that. You kind of almost forget, in a way that
they're
we
forgiven of a lot, aren't they? And it's just kind of like, because they live and exist in a different world, it's like we sort of, yes, plenty of huge celebrities have done horrible things, and yet I suppose their work and their art, we still love that about them. Speaking of a celebrity, like, what is the court like as regards the crowds, the interest in the States, the interest in Canada in this story?
Well, we're living in a strange time, aren't we? Tragically, the day we're recording this, a huge Air India, a horrible plane crash. We've got riots in all the American cities, chaos in the Middle East, and awful, it's still front page in the New York Post. It depends. The New York Times, which you think would probably poo-poo this, they're live blogging it.
They are. I've been reading that, yeah.
Yeah, everybody's covering it. So I think it's the sexual prurience, or whatever the exact word is. So the other thing that this latest witness, I know we're going to run out of time, she said, well, he's a cuck. And I didn't even know. Cuckold, right? That's an old Anglo-Saxon word. He's a cuck. That's, I guess there's a whole porn genre. Men who, cuckolded or cuck husband watches wife get sexy massage and blah, blah, blah.
Oh, that's a thing. I didn't know that.
Yeah, well, that's called, it comes from cuckold. This probably goes back to Chaucer. They just say you're a cuck, and C-U-C-K may not be used as much in Europe and Ireland, but.
So you sit and watch.
You are the man who is, it's the man who's been emasculated by. Now, one of the testimonies is that he has a tiny thing. He has a Tootsie Roll candy. So you think, and he always asked the men had to be hugely endowed. So you wonder if he's sitting there just going, well, I can't do this.
Don't put your head in there, Doug, now.
Yeah. But I'm just saying, it's a very, this cuck thing is, you're a voyeur, but in a way, I guess it's about power too. It's like saying, maybe a lot of powerful men want to do that and feel like, you feel like sometimes these very, very successful and powerful men are masochists. They want somebody to do something, humiliating to them. So who knows what animates our deepest. And also, I'm not going to judge, the Marquis de Sade, and there's a whole history of incredibly brilliant people who like to do odd things. And that's not the crime. The crime is not that, obviously.
The crime is
You know,
obviously about the sexual attacks, the beatings, and this possible human trafficking, which he's been accused of.
and by the way, I would say that if they get into the financial stuff, which they I haven't heard much about it. If they have, I think it's probably that this whole bad boy empire he has, and you and I talked about it, he had Ciroc vodka, that it may be that he was using because the personal assistants were part of the company payroll. No, your actual record company and entertainment was a criminal enterprise. Like, I don't know how it works exactly, but I assume if some of the escorts were paid with company money, that also might be, well, you structured this entire entertainment company. This has happened with a few other, like the Wu-Tang Clan, big hip hop group, were accused, and I think they pled to actually gun running on their tour buses. So you can actually be accused of using your entertainment company as a facilitator of criminal acts. But yeah, just to answer your question after a long-winded digression, it's everybody is checking it compulsively. I think, like, I can't stop from looking at it on Twitter or X, whatever it's called now. I don't want to. I don't want to, but
just every day there's something else kind of just that is, between these presents that are worth, 60 to 100,000 that he seems to hand out like confetti at a wedding. And it's just this whole world that seems so out there, so different.
By the way, just one crime that I think is clear is that he went to the hotel and they kind of threatened the security guard to get that tape, gave him $100,000. So there's bribery to get evidence. I mean, that's not child's play. I mean, if you or I did that, you did something bad at a nightclub in Ireland, you went down there with some goons and said, look, I need that tape. Okay, well, I'll give you money for it. I mean, you'd be charged with something, wouldn't you? You're tampering with evidence. So there's plenty of fire. It's not just smoke. There's plenty of fire. Whether it's getting all confused in the jury's mind with, well, wait, this is mostly sex lives and the private lives of people, and what you do behind closed doors. Well, we're not going to interfere with that. And I kind of looking, just if you glanced at it quickly, you'd say, is this really like mafia racketeering? It seems a little like they overreached. I've heard some lawyers saying that. Does it rise to the level of all these racketeering charges? Or maybe this should have just been domestic violence or something. I don't know.
And it remains to be seen. How many weeks do you think are left? We're trying to work out how we describe where we're at in it, because obviously the days are not all full days, and there's probably another couple of weeks left anyway.
They said 8 weeks total. You said 21 days. I'd say we're more than 3/4 of the way. I mean, I don't think there's many other huge shoes to drop unless they have some. I think they've put their strongest witnesses forward, and the question, they didn't have a very good psychologist. I thought they had a forensic psychologist come in, and from what I read of her evidence, she's been in other celebrity trials, because I thought they should come and really explain abuse 101, like I said to you just now, like learned helplessness. No, you can't think of this as a normal human being, reacting. You have to understand the conditioning that creates this, especially when you start at a young age. I don't know if they explained it in layman's terms in that way. And I think the psychologist they had, the forensic woman, got kind of beat up on the cross-examination. And
of course the big day ahead could be him getting into the witness stand. He's presented in court in a way that he's irritating the judge. He's repeatedly irritating the judge, actually, which is never a great idea. He has the family with him, which will be an attempt to portray himself as a family man despite all this evidence, and he's defending his actions in that they are, consensual, is what he's ultimately saying. But he has an air of what appears to be an air of confidence and arrogance about himself while he's sitting in this position.
But everything's choreographed, remember.
Yeah.
So he had, as I mentioned, he used to dye his hair black. Well, it's gone completely gray. They're selecting what he should wear. So he's wearing these very grandpa-like sweaters, little, loafers. He's looking like an Irishman going to the pub who's 60 years old. Like, he looks like and they are telling him, you've got to present this image that you're not he was known as the shiny suit man because he did some videos.
Yes.
Right. He was known as this. So they are choreographing everything curating, I guess is the word, curating his image. Like, well, no, you're now a 55-year-old man, and present yourself as a gray-haired. I only know the courtroom drawings, but he certainly doesn't look like you. He's not recognizable, right?
No, and if he's managed to do that on the outside, I suppose the spirit of him is still being shown in this way. He's irritating the judge and nodding towards the jury in agreement with evidence, which he shouldn't be doing. What I wanted to ask you was there ever a point in his life that he was humble?
Oh, no. He was, from the time I've told you I met him, and he's just at that point, here's a pattern, because we wrote this in 1999. Jennifer Lopez was dating him, and she's of course since moved on. But it was clear then that there was some kind of, he got her in a lot of trouble in a nightclub shooting. He made his artist shine go away, take even though there are witnesses and a victim who says, no, Combs is the one who shot me. My face is, but he came on my radar. This City College of New York, this stampede of concert goers at a basketball game who were killed. Even then, you just felt like he's not sorry. He doesn't care. He just wants to pay them off and get away with it. He never seemed like, nobody I ever met said he's a good guy. I mean, I never. Whereas, LL Cool J, I could rattle off some kind of Ice-T, these hip hop names that because they've been around for 30 years. You don't have a career of 30 years without being relatively easy to work with, right? I mean, nobody stays with him. He doesn't have artists that have been with him forever because he destroys all their careers, he doesn't have he has no loyalty around him, as far as I can see. And his major artists that Biggie Smalls, Notorious B.I.G. is dead. People think he's complicit in that. But no, I don't. He's not changed into a different man. He always seemed like, and we forgive artists. I wasn't a big Led Zeppelin fan, but like Jimmy Page, we forgive them because, well, there's a genius there. He's a great guitarist. One of the great. The problem with P Diddy is like, there's no talent there. Like, he's not a good rapper. He wasn't a great anything. So you kind of look and say, as you brought up brilliantly, we have to often look past the artist. Ezra Pound was an awful man. He supported the fascists. Yeah, but his poetry is great. But the problem with Diddy, you can't look past it to say, yeah, but look at that verse he did. Well, somebody wrote it for him and he did it badly. And look, he's not a figure that I've ever heard evinces sympathy. Not at all.
And there seems to be nothing coming. And of course, we haven't heard if he's going to make a case for the defense, but there doesn't seem to be a single morsel of evidence in this that's portraying a nice guy.
Nope. And when you said he's denied it all, I mean, one of the things we didn't see, I think they had lots of videos of Cassie doing this, and the jury saw it, and I think it was played in the courtroom, but it happened. It's not a question, and he can't deny the beating tape. A new version came out. It was another angles, and it was just even worse. And you realize, if you got this on tape once, it happened almost daily. His current girlfriend that's testifying, the Jane, he beat her so bad. There are all kinds of shots of her. Oh, just put some makeup on it. Ice it down. We're going to a premiere. No, put some ice on your head. Wear a hat. Whatever. And he just honestly seems like a psychopath. When you look at what he did to these, he just looks like, no matter what, if they complain,
no matter whether he's found guilty or not guilty, what has been said about him, what we've seen about him, what's been heard about him, there is no coming back, as you say. He is now sort of laid bare as a really nasty individual, and obviously somebody certainly with no empathy towards other human beings.
I can't see it. I mean, we look at other people Woody Allen, we loved his movies. He got, married his stepdaughter and all this, Roman Polanski, rape, do you ever think, well, yeah, he can he's also 55. What is he going to have an entertainment career 2-3 years from now where he's become a laughingstock in a way. That's the other thing. Imagine people are just making the jokes about his nipples. And, this is not stuff that,
it's going to be beneficial to him either.
Well, especially in the macho world of hip hop.
Yeah. Well, Doug, let's return to this as it draws towards its end. And obviously, if Diddy gets into the box, will we come back and have a little chat about that?
Yeah.
Because that would be something else. I want to give you a moment to give me a shout out about look, you've so many books. What am I going to say about you? What am I going to say? Your last one was The Last Boss at Brighton. You have another one ready to come out in November about females in the war. Is that right?
Yeah, it's a story of, it's going to be an interesting book. It's historical. We're designing maps of Europe during World War II and where the bombing and parachutes. It's RAF. It was a special unit that, but the women I'm focusing on, a woman named Hannah Senish, they were trying to rescue the Jews who were being deported to the death camps. It's a story that's known, but so I have a British separate. They're behind me there. UK, all the covers are different. It's interesting. They say, no, that won't work here in the UK. So in Ireland, it'll be from Scribe UK. Yeah. And I'll come back and...
No, we'll talk about it when people can actually go out and purchase it. Your other books are Hunting El Chapo. You sort of... and you did 2 books, is that right, with Ice-T?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I may do another. I don't know where...
So you kind of meandered through gangsters... hip hop artists and the war.
And a Jewish middle-class guy from Canada who went to Princeton. It's strange. But yeah, I kind of fell into, there's a commonality. I'm sure you see it too, right? The Kinahans, if you spent time with enough, I mean, you could go to a French, I don't know, the Corsicans, you'd find if you dug in. Yeah. They're the same. It's a very interesting thing that once you get into the criminal mindset, it's, it transfers over. So I don't know. My agent said to me, "It's hard to know what your next book will be because you kind of
pick from a variety of topics."
I'm not like you. Like you're a specialist, and I feel like I'm you say a jack of all trades, master of none. I don't know, but
not at all. And you're great on all the rapper and the P Diddy stuff, etc. So keep following this trial, as will I, and we will liaise again in a couple of weeks' time. How's that?
When the verdict is coming in, or maybe when they're deliberating.
I think when they finish, and if it's like here, what happens usually is there's they will sum up the prosecution case, they'll sum up the defense if they have one, and then the jury will retire. So we will liaise before they retire, and we'll report on the end of the case, the last couple of weeks of it, and obviously we'll come back when there's a verdict.
Yeah, and don't ask me to predict. It could be a hung jury. It could be a mistrial. Who knows? Yeah. I have no clue. Nobody can predict what's going to happen with this madness. Something stranger might happen. So,
indeed,
Nicola,
listen. Be careful of the wildfires and stay alive, so as we can see in a few weeks' time. Thanks a million, Doug.
Okay, thanks, Nicola. Thanks for having me.
I'm Nicola Tallant, and you're watching Crime World, a podcast about criminals, drugs, and the underworld in Ireland and across the globe. Make sure you subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you can be the first to watch all our latest episodes. You can also listen wherever you get your podcasts.